And if you guys are all ready, today we are going to walk through a way of thinking about a landscape layout that makes the design process much more manageable. This is about not drawing pretty plans just yet. I cannot do those, so. This is about organizing ideas before you worry about materials, dimensions, or construction details. Those are coming later. The sequencing that we are going to use today, or will use now, will help us move from bubble diagrams to form composition to spatial design. And this is a way to structure your thinking so the site doesn't feel overwhelming from the start to finish. You can think about this as part of the design process. So how do you get from point A to point B? And bubble diagrams to spatial design is going to help you along the way. So oftentimes the idea of creating a landscape plan or landscape construction design and plan and incorporating structures in it can be overwhelming, especially for larger properties. The placement of trees, planting beds, lawns, walkways, trellises, the raised beds, and everything else in between, including the other elements, can feel like an unachievable puzzle. As a designer, if you use this process, it is going to help to guide you through these. The design, why you might find, why designers thinks that this problem is overwhelming, because everything seems connected. And they are not just seems connected, they are connected. You cannot think about planting a tree if you are not thinking about how this tree is going to affect its surrounding 5, 10 years, 15 years from now. When we follow these steps, each step is going to focus on one type of decision, and you are going to make those step-by-step decisions individually, one by one. You are not trying to solve everything at once, and that is what I'm trying to emphasize here, that if you follow these steps in an orderly fashion, then this process is going to be not overwhelming. As a matter of fact, it's going to be fun. Landscape layouts and designs usually move through 4 stages, and we are going to talk all 4 of them. We are going to start with bubble diagrams or functional diagrams. Think about bubble diagrams as functions. Other way you can think about bubble diagrams as outdoor rooms. Now you have to turn these bubble diagrams into something. You need to turn these into shapes. And once you start turning bubble diagrams into shapes, then we are going to start implementing form composition. Now, form composition is fantastic. It's 2-dimensional. You are working on a piece of paper, how everything is interconnected on this flat plane. However, we are 3-dimensional beings. We need to get into the 3rd dimension. Spatial composition is going to help you with that. Spatial composition will guide you how to introduce the 3rd dimension to the process, and how you are going to experience that design itself. And once you combine all these, especially form composition and spatial composition, you are going to get to spatial design, and this is going to be the overall structure of your project, of your design. Each stage is going to build on a previous one, and that's why you don't want to skip any of these. Here is an example. We are going to start out with a bubble diagram, just like this. Oh, my mouse is gone. Bubble diagram just like this. Once the bubbles are getting an actual shape, then you are going to achieve form composition. Once you introduce structures to a form composition, then you are essentially reach the spatial composition stage. And when you combine all this together, then you are going to reach a spatial design. And this is going to be the document that is essentially your final design on a paper with all that information that is needed for a particular project. Each stage going to answer a different question and builds on the previous one. Skipping steps, it's going to create confusion later. Let's talk about bubble diagrams. Bubble diagrams are an early planning diagram that represent functions rather than forms. Each bubble diagram stands for a space or activity, and this is where the outdoor rooms are coming into play again. These diagrams are not drawn to scales. These bubbles are not drawn to scales. Their purpose is to show you organizational relationship, explore relationship, figure out adjacency, and how general flow across the site is happening. At this moment, you should think about the client's wishes. You should think about a site inventory, a site analysis, and you are going to create a bubble for each item on your list. This bubble could be represent a recreation area, could be represent turf, could be represent a privacy hedge or a fence. These bubbles might include elements such as vegetable garden, a shed, a cutting garden, or a planting bed. Experiment and try different combinations. Sometimes your third, fourth, or fifth drawing end up being a best one. Now, interesting thing about bubble diagrams. Oftentimes, bubble diagrams are associated with space and planning design for landscapes. If you are designing your home, if you are designing an office layout, same rules apply. In that case, the bubbles are standing in for the actual rooms. Where is your bathroom? Where is your bedroom? Where is your living room? And when you are designing the house, you can move and organize stuff together. If you are designing an office space, where is receiving? Where is the reception? Where is the mail part? Where is the clerks? How they are working? How they are connect to each other? Bubble diagrams are exceedingly important to help figure out relationships. So I mentioned it. Look at this example right here. This is an office layout. Conference room, next to a reception. Where is the coffee? Where the CEO sits. And this is the walkway. How all these how these different bubbles are connected to each other. Bubble diagrams are loose and flexible. They don't have edges. They are squishy. You can move them around. You are using them without committing a specific shape or layouts. What you need to focus on at this stage, you need to ask functional questions. What spaces are required? What spaces should be near to each other? If your client wants a veggie garden and the garden shed and the turf, maybe place the garden shed next to a veggie garden so they can store like wheelbarrows and tools in that shed close to the raised garden bed. So not every time they want to garden, they have to drag everything across the whole property, across lawn or a playground. Think about which spaces might need separation. Bubble diagrams will help you answer those questions without getting distracted by shape or size. Start with bubbles. Don't start with, oh, we have to have a playground that is this big. No. Just create a bubble for the playground. Don't worry about the sizing just yet. Bubble diagrams are useful to help translate the client's needs and wishes. What is great about bubble diagrams, and you can try this out at home, you can literally cut out different colored paper, circles or bubbles, and you can just start shoving them around a piece of paper. You can use this method to narrow down options. When you're creating a bubble diagram, start with the client's wishes. Whatever they wish, each requirement becomes a bubble. The bubbles are squishy. Expect to redraw them time to time. Wishes change, opportunities change, so don't be afraid to moving or changes bubbles around. When you can tell the bubble diagrams are done, it is complete when all the major spaces are represented. if and when the relationship makes sense, if the circulation makes sense, if they are connected and it looks functional. They don't need to be precise, they don't need to be accurate. Don't worry about edges, don't worry about sizes just yet. Once you like the relationship, the spaces, once you like the relationship of the bubbles and your outdoor rooms, then you can start thinking about finalizing their forms. And we are going to transition into the form composition study. And let's see how would that thing would look like. Here is an example. Let's talk about transitioning from bubble diagram. Any questions about bubble diagrams? Or did I give you enough information about it? Okay.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Is this something that you just are doing for yourself in the design process, or is it something that you would share or talk with your client about?
You can do both ways. Definitely use the bubble diagram for yourself because it will help you develop a layout. But you are more than welcome. Maybe I would probably pick a client's brain if they are so inclined and they want to help. You can use bubble diagrams as a helpful way to connect with a client and ask. You can just tell them, hey, listen, you told me on our meeting that you want a playground, you have pets, you want gardening. Now I envision a basic layout like this. What do you think if this blue bubble representing the playground is go next to the green bubble that is representing your edible garden? Are you okay with this layout or you want to switch them around? It's okay to use it in that sense. But if you're using bubble diagrams to communicate and coordinate with a client, tell them to not to freak out. These are not the final dimensions. These are not how it's going to look like. This is just a helpful tool. Okay? Okay. So bubble diagrams, how to transition from bubble diagrams to actual forms. Bubble diagrams tell us what spaces we need. Form composition is going to ask what those spaces should look like on the ground. Once we start moving from bubble diagrams to form composition, that's when we are going to transition from abstract thinking to a physical layout. Abstract thinking would be, oh, the playground next to the edible garden. Physical layout is going to be that, yes, the playground is this big and have to fit in that corner of the property. And because of that sizing, that will leave X amount of room for the raised garden bed for the edible garden. So you might ask the question, what is the form composition? Form composition is the process when you are converting these bubbles into clear two-dimensional shapes. I'm going to emphasize, we are still talking about two dimensions here. This is a piece of paper. You are moving bubbles around. With a form composition, you are going to create actual two-dimensional shapes on that piece of paper. These shapes are going to define the outdoor rooms, and these are going to establish edges. At this stage, the layout becomes more legible, but is still conceptual. Now you might be wondering what the bubble diagram is not. I'm sorry, what the form composition is not. Form composition is a composition, it's not the finished site plan. It does not include materials, dimension, plant species, or construction details. This is just a form and how the different rooms are going to correlate and connect to each other. Once you like the relationship between these spaces, it's time to define your garden rooms by creating and drawing this. And that's when we are going to talk about the form composition study. So I have some very basic examples here. So for example, you start with here, clients want a garden, here is a turf and here is the patio. And here is this pathway just slapped in between these two to provide access. Now you can turn these into basic forms. There are 5 distinctive forms are out there: rectangular or square, circular or radial, curvilinear, diagonal, and arc and tangent. you can create any of these, and just for giggles, I just created a very basic rectangular form composition right here on the right hand side. The color coding does correlate to the different outdoor rooms. In this form composition, you will see that the turf turned into a rectangle here. The pathway had defined edges now. I'm sorry, garden and the turf both have defined edges, and the patio gets somewhat of a dimension as well. So this is how you get from bubbles to form composition. What can influence the form choices? Not everything is going to be rectangular. Not everything is going to be circular. At this stage, you are not choosing plants, you are not choosing materials, you are going to focus on shape, proportion, and consistency. What can influence your choice is definitely the client's wishes, the garden style, what you are going for, site characteristics like trees and boundaries and slope and garden existing vegetation and layout, and adjacency between outdoor rooms. So because these are the form choices are influenced by all these, the forms are somewhat set in place, but you can still move them around and work around those. There are a handful of key considerations in form composition. As you develop forms, pay attention to geometry, scale, and proportion. Remember, we are harkening back a little bit of the design basics as well. Consider how adjacent spaces are going to meet with each other and how the overall composition feel. Balancing and clarifying everything is more important than complexity. Sometimes less is more. Once you are converting your bubbles into form composition, then you are in the process to creating a visual theme. Consistency of form is going to create an orderly design. Form composition is a way how you can create an orderly transition and orderly connection between outdoor rooms. And I have a list of outdoor rooms here. These are all outdoor rooms, for example, steps and walkways, planting beds, terraces, decks and entryways. What else can we tell about form composition? I use the same example like 2 slides ago. I just wanted to go from this basic layout, garden, turf, patio, and the walkway. I try to retain function, size, and location of these outdoor rooms. I'm going to call it outdoor rooms again, but you will see 6 distinctive and different form composition studies. I'm going to call them form composition studies based on that one particular bubble diagram. And this is where the connection between the bubble diagram and the form composition is happening, and this is where your design prowess is coming to play. You can come up more than 6. You can create 2. That is fantastic. Just look at these. Edges are not defined here in the bubble diagrams, but edges are well defined here in the form composition study. If you pay close attention, the size of a garden is very close to each other, each of these form composition. The connectivity between the pathways essentially is going from top to bottom, top to bottom, top to bottom. The size of a turf, size of a patio, and the location of the turf and the patio, and the garden itself, it's somewhat set in place, but the layout looks a little bit different. And depending what your client wishes, then you can go and create any of these compositions, and you can create similar compositions. So again, just a reminder, bubble diagram is just a start. Form composition where you can shine, and that's when your individuality can come into play. Any questions? Okay, let's go to the next slide. Now, form. Started with bubbles without edges. Let's talk a little about basic forms, geometry of forms. Most basic ones, circles, squares, triangles. I'm not going into details. If you integrate any of these into your designs, just know a few basic things about circles. What is important? Circles are simple, complete, and essential. They are a perfect form. There are significant parts and components to it that you should know about. So if someone talk about a radius of a circle, that you know what is that about. Triangles, triangle shaped designs are man-made. It's a simple polygon, has a great deal of strength. Triangles are one of the strongest forms that is out there, not just height looks like about height function. When you walk through a bridge, oftentimes you will see this triangle shaped construction of steel beams because that is going to provide the most strength for the amount of material used. And finally, let's talk about a square. This is formal, this is man-made as well. It has a purpose, has a direction, and an orientation. Think about axes, sides, and diagonals. Your design could be focusing on any of these forms. You can change these around, you can combine them. These are just basic forms. I just wanted to have a slide about them so we are all talking about the same things. You can expand on forms. You can stack forms, you can combine forms, you can create more forms out of them. If you are creating a walkway, if you are creating a patio, you can think about paver and tile combination. You can start out with something simple, or shall I say boring like this, and you can go nuts. You can create a very interesting shape. You can use different colors, different tiles. You can combine forms and you can create forms that were non-existent before. You can expand on these forms. Is there any way you can combine these? Well, let's look some examples. Yes, you can you can definitely combine forms. Most design going to rely on dominant familiar forms such as rectilinear, curvilinear, or angular. Choose a primary form. Family help us unifying a design. Here are some examples what to do and what not to do. You can make in your design, you can make a square or a circle dominant, doesn't matter which one is stand forward. You can create strong relationship, however, avoid weak relationship between outdoor rooms. You should be strong and organized. Try to avoid acute sharp angles. These are just going to look weird. Weak composition, too much overlap. Try to get away from this. So plan and design strong relationship and keep your design organized and strong. Let's see some other examples. So based on these basic forms, you can develop multiple design themes. Here is a curvilinear design themes. This is great. I like this. If you have a weirdly shaped property or somewhat, or even if you just start out with a square and you want to turn it to something different, this circular or radial design is very interesting. It is intense. It is interesting. It's expanding. There are a couple of adjectives come to mind: progressive, strong, flamboyant, attractive, mysterious, concentrating, and maze-like. Think about how you can overlap circles with each other, how you connect them with each other. Try to avoid too much or too little overlap. So some funky design like this can be done, and it's not happening quite often. People have a tendency to run away from circles. I yet to see this is not a very common form that used in design. You can start with circles, you can combine them, and you can create sort of like a curvilinear design. What kind of characteristic this design has? Well, this is fluid, this is soft, This is graceful, interesting. It's beautiful. It's organic. This is a very organic shape. Olmsteds use this kind of design with their flowing walkways and natural areas connected with rolling turfs. It is spiritual, it's sensual, delicate, it can be intimate. You can create individual enclosed little outdoor rooms. This is non-traditional, this is casual, and this is pleasant. So you can do something like this, starting with circles. Rectilinear design. This approach uses vertical and horizontal lines on a square grid. This is dominant, quick, orderly, basic, easy. This is a very good starting design if you're just starting out as a designer. It is directional, it is strong, it is rigid. It is forceful, defined, and static. However, these are strong and powerful words. It doesn't mean that this design is boring or ugly. You can create something awesome, something cool. This type of a layout for a narrow or a small city lot is perfect, because if you do organize something like this, it will, the design and the whole site will look larger than it is in real life. What if you want to get away from horizontal and vertical? You can tilt everything in a 45-degree angle. This is great. This is at dynamics. This is intense, active, tense, exciting, strong, bold, vigorous, and connecting. You will see this kind of design often in city parks and public spaces. You know, you want to provide connectivity, for example, across these edges. You want to create an open vista. You want to have a deck and a patio here. You want to look out to this planter bed in the middle as a focal point. So yes, horizontal, vertical. If it's too boring, next steps could be just turn everything at a 45-degree angle. It's a perfect opportunity to do something funky. Can you combine things? Can you combine straight with curves? Can you focus on curves only? If you want to combine, how do you combine things? You can combine certain things. Arc and tangent, these are not full circles, just part of a circles. This design approach compromised of horizontal, vertical, and 45-degree lines, quarter, half, three-quarter, and full circles on a square grid. What is great about this? It is interesting. It is a combination of traditional and a combination of natural. It is soft, it's flowing, has curves to it. It is inviting. It is formal, however less formal than a rectilinear design. It is transitional. You are always excited to see what is behind the next curve. It is a compromise because you are going between horizontal, vertical, and 45-degree to curves. It is smooth, passive, and pleasing. So this is a good combination as well. The layout here, this is the exact same small yard example that you have seen a couple slides before. You can make something cool like this. And this doesn't have to be all plantings. This could be a water feature. This could be a raised garden bed. This could be turf. This could be a patio, and this could be just a shrub and tree planting to provide a border. So this associates from the colors. Your imagination can fill in the blanks in between. Think about the forms right now, nothing else. So far, we worked in 2 dimensions. Now we need to get into the 3rd dimension. We are all humans. We are functioning in 3-dimensional space. We are not operating on a horizontal flat surface. Spatial composition is going to give you the upright parts. This is going to give you that oomph. This is going to give you the 3rd dimension. Spatial composition is going to give you the 3rd dimension. This is going to help you focus on the experience. And it's going to sound weird, but this experience is going to be, for example, a trellis, a pergola, a wall, a fence, or even a fountain. Any of these elements that in a 3rd dimension, they are going to help guide or restrict how people move through this site. these elements are going to either connect or separate different outdoor rooms. Spatial composition is less about the geometry at this level, it's about perception. How everything is interconnected, how everything looks like. When you are designing and building the pergola, your your form composition is already done. You know where you are going to install that pergola. So at that point, the location is set. At this point, you are building into the third dimension. How you transition from a form composition to a spatial composition? Once you establish your shapes on a two-dimensional piece of paper on that horizontal layout, then you are going to think about what can I do to this site? What else I can add to this site to make it to come to alive? How it's going to feel when it's in use? And this is where spatial composition begins. It is okay to create a bubble diagram for entertaining. It is okay to use for composition that, yes, this is going to be a patio with a sitting area. But when you start thinking about a patio and a sitting area, you are thinking about outdoor furniture, you are thinking about entertaining tables, maybe a bench. You are entering into a third dimension. In this way, spatial composition is going to introduce the height and the enclosure. Height is going to be, for example, height of a bench that you are going to sit on, or height of a table that you are going to serve food on. And enclosure, this is going to be the borders and edges of the pergola or a trellis. Vertical elements such as planting, walls, structures, and grade changes going to help define the outdoor rooms. Again, we went from bubble diagrams to form composition, and we are into spatial composition now. We are building up now. As spaces start to feel contained, as you develop this concept, you add elements to the third dimensions. This space is going to can start feel contained if you are walling it off, and it doesn't mean to be you have to wall it off with walls, but you can use other elements to function as boundaries as well, or you can make them open, or you can make them transitional. Think about enclosure and openness. Think about movement and pause. Think about compression and release, visibility and screening. Think about floors. Think about walls. Think about ceilings. We are talking about outdoor rooms. Walls could be anything, could be a fence, a wall, a hedge, a plant, a tree trunk, or a row of shrubs. Ceiling, that could be anything. That could be a sky. It could be a canopy above it. It could be the trees, pergolas, or other structures, or a shade cloth. Yeah, floors can be anything. Floors could be gravel under your feet. Floors could be turf. Floors could be a deck as well. Spatial composition is a guide to three dimension. Now, what are the key aspects of spatial composition? Well, spatial organization, movement, hierarchy and views, focal point, and transition. Open spaces allow for expansive views, while enclosed spaces can create intimacy and focus. This is when the client wishes are coming to play. Are they going to entertain like 50 people at a gathering? Or they are planning to have a quiet Sunday breakfast for two? You design an open space versus an enclosure, depending what they want. Balancing of open space and enclosure is essential to crafting a dynamic experience. You can balance open areas with enclosed space to create a variety and comfort. Think about zoning. Different zones or outdoor rooms such as seating areas, pathways, water features should be strategically placed to create seamless flow between functional and aesthetic areas. Zoning helps organize activities logically across sites. Remember I told you about if you have gardeners, you build a garden area with a raised garden bed and you also build a shed for them. Make sure they are connected or close to each other because you want a logical progression between those two zones, those two outdoor rooms. Think about transitions and thresholds. We are in the third dimension now. Spatial composition. Changes in elevation can signal shift in space. Threshold. What are threshold? A boundary is a threshold. A bench could be a threshold. A low wall could be a threshold. Transition from a lawn to a flower bed can create a sense of progression and discovery. So think about this when you are focusing on spatial composition. What else we can focus on while you are designing or creating a design and working in spatial composition? You can think about views and focal points. You want to create a focal point like a statue, a water feature, or an architectural element that will draw the eye to it. Make sure this particular spot is exciting, it's cool. This could be as simple as a statue or an interesting border in a garden. It could be as complex as a planting that is changes by season by season by season. You can organize a landscape to frame a specific view or open vistas. You can use plants, walls, or other architectural elements to frame distant views or close-off areas to provide privacy. So all these are working with each other in conjunction. Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't meant to skip hierarchy of spaces yet. Not spaces are created equal. Primary spaces, with most use spaces, usually are larger. They are aligned differently. Think about your house. Your dining room, your family room is larger than a bedroom because you are going to spend more time in the family room than in a bedroom. For your garden, is the same. Think about, you have to prioritize, you have to set a higher hierarchy of the space that you are going to get used more. As a designer, you can also help guide people. You can manipulate spaces to guide users certain key aspects of the design. You can create sweeping pathways or a row of trees to lead them into a garden room. Or you can create, if you want to, maybe a corn maze for Halloween. That is one of those hierarchy of spaces to guide you a very specific location. Harkening back to the very, very first presentation about design elements, balance and proportion in space. You want to maintain proportional relationship between elements. Scale of a seating area should be complemented by the surrounding garden bed. This is the situation I know when I see it, I know when I feel it. Make sure that you maintain balance. Make sure you maintain balance between sizing. Make sure to maintain balance between open spaces and enclosure. Make sure to maintain balance with evergreens and deciduous trees, organic and inorganic materials. All these are going to create balance and proportion in space. If you are not following these guidelines, you are going to create imbalance and disproportion in space. So be mindful of these actions and steps. So let's talk a little bit about a relationship between form and spatial composition. You've seen examples and a couple slides about form composition and spatial composition as well. It is important to emphasize and cannot reinforce it strong enough. These two things really cannot be separated. In practice, they always work together. You create a form composition in 2 dimension. Spatial composition is going to be the upright third dimension element of this. Fourth composition is about where things go, and you have seen this with the bubble diagrams because you move them around. And form composition, once you step away from the bubble diagrams, is going to help you what shape they are going to take. This is going to provide the overall structure of the site. Space composition is going to be what you add to the site to make those spaces feel unique or special. Are these spaces are going to be open or enclosed? Again, tight or generous, calm or dynamic? How do you move from one space to the next? If you have strong form, but you don't think about space, then you have a flat layout that might look great from the top down, but there is nothing exciting about it. The site or a design is going to feel flat and stiff. It will look okay on paper, but it doesn't going to feel great being in. On the other hand, if you have great spatial ideas, but no clear form holding it together, or it's just a jumble shoved together, you created a weak composition. The result can feel messy or confusing. A good landscape design happens when form and space are working together. Okay? So you're going to start with the bubble diagrams, go to form composition, spatial composition. Ultimately, you are going to create a spatial design. If you manage complexity well and you design spaces, they are going to work well together and they are going to feel good to be in. Here's a quick summary. Bubble diagrams are going to organize functions and relationship. Form composition, going to define space. You are going to define shape, define space, and you are going to focus on geometry. Spatial composition, going to add the third dimension, enclosure, movement, and hierarchy. And all of this together going to form a spatial design. You need to think clearly. You need to develop your skills and be confident to combine all these to create landscapes that are look great in paper but function well out as well. Here's an example, and I'm going to go through it a little bit slower, step by step. So very first drawing is a simple bubble diagram. You can tell it's a bubble diagram because this section calls out, for example, this is like a patio without any kind of sizing or positions. Here will be a connection. Here's a walkway depicted by these little arrows. There's some planting around, hedges, couple trees, ground covers. This is just a basic bubble diagram. When you are stepping away from a bubble diagram and you finalize your form, so this lump and this gray squiggly line is actually going to turn into this patio and this little walkway in front of the house. This is when a form composition is going to start. You planned a seating area, and there was a bubble diagram for it, and that turned into an actual seating area right here with a number 1 right here. There's another seating area here, but it doesn't really cause us it yet. However, during the form composition, there is a bench right here. We don't know the sizing yet. We just know there will be a bench on that particular location. A patio. Patio in this bubble diagram, just a gray glob, just a gray mess. In a form composition, it has definite edges, it has a shape, it is a rectangle, and you can see its proportions. And this is where you went from a bubble to a form composition. Now, oftentimes people get lost here. How to get from front composition to spatial composition? This is the help right here. Now your shapes are actually 100% finalized. Now, what was a bench here, it also has some measurement and dimensions. So you know how tall, how wide, how big this bench is going to be. Or this gate and the trellis actually has some measurement and sizing. So right now, in this form composition, this is your two-dimensional drawing and a spatial design. Now you can envision because you are built up as well. Does this make any sense? Any questions? Are we good? Okay.
Yeah.
There is a PDF from there's a PDF on Canvas with additional information. I grabbed the screenshot from that PDF as well, and there's more information in those 4 pages. I just like these because these are so exemplary and great. So here is your basic bubble diagram. Lawn in the middle, planting beds on both sides, a cutting garden, compost area, vegetable garden. Uh, let's create a 45-degree angle design because why not? Lawn is still here, planting bed, cutting garden, vegetable garden. Or maybe go with a curvilinear theme and have this organic flowing area. Here is a form composition study. Nothing is finalized yet, just basic forms on a piece of paper. Next step, you finalize. Let's go with this design. There are actual measurements. You can tell the client how wide, how long this garden is going to be, but it's still missing the third dimension. Let's say if the shed is here and the vegetable garden, and then you are introduce something that is going to be in a third dimension. For example, this is the sitting area and this raised garden bed. This is actually a standalone picture, doesn't really correlate the picture itself. This is just an example of the spatial composition items in a third dimension. So think about it that way. And this is how everything is connected together. So start with a bubble diagram. Form and spatial composition is going to give you a final spatial design. And thank you for it. This concludes this presentation. If you have any questions, I'm happy to answer now.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
When we're working on the presentation for the our project for you, are you looking for us to get to the spatial? Eventually, we're going to move in and do the spatial. I guess. Are we? I'm not sure what I'm trying to say.
Yes, you are going to create or design structures that are going to be into the third dimension. Yes.
Okay. Okay.
And that could be a fence, that could be a bench, that could be a wall, that could be a fountain, that could be a trellis.
Okay.
And the reason why we're getting away from 2 dimensions, because when you do landscape design with plants, you are working in 2 dimensions. This is construction design. We have to get into the third dimension, and the easiest way to do that is going to be with structures.
Perfect.